Okay, so I'm gonna be talking about bugs. Uh, if there's people who don't face any bugs in their work, that's great. For the rest of us, for the past 7 years in the industry and seeing maybe several hundred conference talks, I haven't seen enough discussion about how to learn from bugs, like having some kind of good process of learning from them. If we think about the airline industry, in the early 1960s, late 1950s, there was about 40 fatal accidents on every 1 million departure. If you think about nowadays, 2014, there was 37.4 million departures. So if you're gonna have 40 accidents per 1 million departure, that would be 1,500 per year, and on average 4 per day. So 4 airplanes would be dropping and people would be dying in each day. So way the things were in the 1960s, that just wouldn't fly. We wouldn't have the industry these days. So one of the reasons why airplanes are very safe these days is that they have a really strict approach on learning from every mistake they make. There's, if you're curious, there's the Aviation Herald that lists ranging based on the severity from incident to accident and to crash. And you can notice that they gather a lot of information. The more severe the accident is, you have a really thorough investigation and they will get every possible learning out of it. And for the past 40, 50 years, it's gone from the 40 accidents per 1 million departure to basically 0 these days. The latest, I think, accidents are more or less about the mental health of the pilots, or perhaps shooting down a plane. So they've got the technical reliability to a level where they need to focus on some other aspects. Now, you might think that the airline industry is a bit different from what we do. But if you think about a company like Google, they don't think that that's much different. And they actually have very well-designed approach on learning from bugs. They've written this book, Site Reliability Engineering, how Google runs production systems. It's actually out there on the web for everyone to read, or you can buy the book. But one of the things that they described on the book was that they need to have some kind of process of learning from mistakes that they do. Even though they try to be as good as possible, they will still face problems and have outages here and there. So they try to learn as much as they can from it. So they have a post-mortem approach, which I've understood is not that rare in the technology industry. So basically, it's a written record of an accident or incident, and its impact, actions taken to resolve it, and root cause and follow-up actions to prevent it happening again. But they don't do it for every possible bug, of course, because if it's a trivial, it doesn't affect much. Why do you spend so much time on preventing it? But if there's, these are some of the triggers, some of the cases where they actually will go through a post-mortem session and write down and take every learning out of it. For example, user visible downtime, data loss of any kind, release rollback, and so on. And it varies from team to team what kind of triggers they have. But I guess the point being that the more severe the problem, the more they will put focus on learning from it. And other thing to keep in mind is that if you're going to have a culture of learning from bugs and discussing about them and how to improve the way we do things in future, you need to assume that people did the right thing. You need to assume that the people did the correct thing with the information they had, and they had the right intentions. And for what it's worth, I think you should do that not only in case of postmortem, but generally in work. I think it might raise your empathy toward your colleagues. Because if you will, it will be finger pointing and shaming, then people will hide the information and they will hide that they had any part of any incident that happened. So blameless culture is almost necessary if you're going to go and discuss and learn about bugs. If you go through this with your team, then it might be useful for others to learn about it too. So at least in Google, they share a lot these postmortems. They have a postmortem of the month, some really interesting one that they share on some intranet site. They have Google Plus postmortem groups where they can discuss about postmortems. And they have reading clubs. A couple teams can unite and have a discussion about specific postmortem and get lessons out of it. And they also have a wheel of misfortune for the new employees, because the postmortem is an actual incident. They have a really good detailed description what happened, what were the root causes, what was done and what was not done, and so on. So they will put the new employee in a situation where they will discuss, and this has happened now, this is the symptom, what you're gonna do. And they have a really good information about the postmortem, so that's a really useful learning experience for the new employee if done in a delicate manner. If you're gonna share the information, I think you might not want to have any customer-specific privacy information there. So if you're gonna write postmortems, don't put any social security numbers or anything like that. So that will make it possible to share it company-wide. Here's one example of a postmortem done by Google. You can find it here, and I have a link later on the slides, or where you can find these slides and check the link afterwards. So you can see a bit what kind of information they write there and just what the structure of the postmortem is. If you don't want to go to team scale or company scale or unit scale, you can do it yourself. This is a blog post from a Swedish developer, Henrik Varne. He has written for 13 years, on average 1 per month, bugs that have been interesting from his perspective, and what learnings he got out of it. So he mentioned on the blog post example and what kind of information he writes down. And so if you don't want to go to team scale, you can just try it out yourself. If it works, maybe share it with a colleague, and in the end with the team and so on. But this is fairly easy to try it yourself if you don't want to go to the team scale, and if it's hard to get the time arranged for this kind of thing. And we also tried it at the place where I work at in IF with one of our teams. So we had an incident that we found and fixed. So we went it through as a team, write down these kind of things to Confluence site, what kind of lessons we learned, what kind of experiments we could do for the future to not face the problem anymore. I think one of the learnings from this was that we had nothing when we started the session, so it would have been probably better to write in advance by the person who knew the most about the fix and the problem. So that would have been better to her to write it in advance and then to go it through as a group then. So we spent quite a lot of time writing it down in an understandable way. Another thing was that there was one person had fixed it and spent most of the time with it, so I think the collective learning and collective understanding about the problem and the symptoms and how it was fixed increased during the session. So I think we most likely will try it out in the future also. There's the link to the slides, and I haven't seen much these kind of approaches used. Maybe you have, but I haven't. So I think these would be useful things to try out yourself or with the team. For example, if you're gonna get some production issue and what you're gonna learn from it. Thanks.